Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. The meeting will be starting shortly. While we wait, let's learn more about Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
Welcome everybody to the Facility Advisory Committee meeting, February 16th. So we'll do a quick roll call and then we'll get right into our main attraction tonight, which is the public safety feasibility study. So we'll start with a roll call. Amanda?
Amanda Kelly, present.
Peter Lennon, present.
Mark Layton, present.
Chris Weeks, present. And with that, I think we are ready to go. We don't have any meeting minutes to evaluate from the last meeting. So with that, we will get right into the feasibility study presentation. So, are you like the master of ceremonies? Should I turn it over to you, Dave?
I am, yes.
Okay.
I will take it from here.
All right,
Thank you very much. Here to present the main reason is the program and site evaluation for a public safety complex. Let's see. It's on.
Question. You probably have to do it from the recording.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Ruh-roh.
It was working a minute ago.
That's always the way.
Okay, can someone grab that mouse for me, Rob, somebody?
Oh, sure. What do you mean that?
Just grab the
Rob,
mouse.
go ahead.
The mouse, over here, come on, Will.
Oh.
Is it wired or wireless?
It was working.
If it's wireless, you might be able to do it from.
So just,
On the mouse?
you know,
Yeah.
click this mouse.
You could just click it from the
I don't
table.
have mouses. Okay, so you just tell me next and I'll,
Yeah,
then you
we're
can
at
do it from
introductions.
me.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, technical difficulties. It was working. I tried it like 5 minutes ago and it was working great. Anyway, here with me tonight is Police Chief Stephen Poulin, Fire Chief Eric Wilkin, and LaValle Brensinger Architects Representative Robert Robachek, and myself, Town Planner Dave Sharples. Next, Bob.
Oh, sorry.
Dave, do you want us to do our intros?
Yeah, yep, we will. So just tell you how the presentation is gonna go tonight. We're gonna have a word from our departments. The chief and fire chief will each say a little bit to the committee. Then I'm gonna go over purpose, need, background, kind of how we got here over the last 20 years, briefly though, 5-8 minutes. And then the bulk of the meeting, it will be Rob Robachek from LaValle Brensinger Architects to go over the 4 documents that were created that you got, that I sent you via email, and then we'll open up to questions, comments from the FAC and the public. So with that, I'll turn it over to the chiefs.
Hi, everyone. I'd first like to start off by thanking the people of Exeter who voted last March on Article 13 so that we could be here today for this evaluating the alternatives for a new public safety complex. I know that members here have recently toured the facilities to gain firsthand knowledge of the need and importance for such a project. We also just filmed a straightforward walkthrough video of both police and fire sides with Exeter TV. We perform this so that the public can be also equipped with the same knowledge pertaining to our current situation and future needs. I want to recognize the hard work put forth by our town planner, Dave Sharples, who has been instrumental with his specific areas of knowledge on this phase of the project, and also the Facilities Advisory Committee, and members of the Budget Recommendations Committee who have been actively engaged in various discussions on Zoom and in person from the very start. After the vote last year, members of the FAC in town participated in oral boards of prospective architectural firms. As a result, the town decided to contract with LaValle Brensinger, led by Bob Robichek. We continue to be impressed by Bob's customer-oriented approach and a commitment to high quality of work thus far in this project. Chief Wilking, Dave, and I have been involved in numerous meetings, and we do feel that our input is being valued along the way. I can't stress enough that we are well aware that this project is at the beginning evaluation stages. We have an open mind towards the options presented to us thus far, and we also look forward to having public meetings and active discussions with the people of Exeter for their input on this endeavor. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. And I too would like to say thank you, our Eric Wilking and Fire Chief. I thank you, the Facilities Committee, for your willingness to work on this important project with us. And I would be remiss if I too didn't thank Dave Sharples for shepherding this project thus far, and Bob Robichek and LaValle for listening to our concerns, our recommendations, and their assistance in gathering the necessary data and information to get us to where we are today. The Chief and I have collaborated a lot on where we are, and as he said, we have conducted a walkthrough and a narrative to help not only you, but the citizens of Exeter better understand the facility as it currently is. We hope that using our local experiences, the history, and coupling that with best practices with MRI, one of the consultants used in this study, we can really have some decent options and talk through what they all would offer. Our hope is that these options address the basic lack of space for our employees, both police and fire, ADA access, our operational, training, emergency management, and storage within the facility, to name a few. Lack of space for apparatus and equipment and gear, size of the bays and the doors are important aspects of this study, as well as very limited space for future growth, whether it's personnel, equipment, or operational needs as we take on different changes to our mission and what the taxpayers of Exeter need. Lastly, a lot of the operational piece we see and the options we see are addressing a number of the issues that were addressed in the CPSM study completed a year and a half ago, and those recommendations addressing some operational turnout times and speeding up our ability to get to the public, and we're hoping that when we look at these options we can address a number of those issues as well. So I'll stop right there, and I thank you in advance for all of your efforts here.
So briefly, what is the purpose? It's kind of been said, but to find a suitable site or sites for our public safety departments includes analyzing the current site and multiple others that Bob will get into further about the various sites we've looked at. Just briefly on the need, just to give you some perspective of how Exeter May has changed since 1979 when the public safety complex, the existing complex, was constructed. In 1980, the Exeter population was just over 11,000, and today the population in the 2020 census, might even be more today in 2022, but it's over 16,000, which represents an increase of 5,025 people, or a 46% increase. So we've had quite a lot of growth in Exeter, actually between the 2010 and 2020 census, we were the fastest growing community in the Seacoast, and we added almost 1,700 people. In 1979, the police department had 31 employees, fire department had 13, for a total of 44 at that time. The police department now has 37 employees, fire department has 35, for a total of 72, represents an increase of 28 employees, or a 64% increase.
Excuse me, Dave, are there hard copies of this?
Yeah, it's on our website. I'm going to post it on the web page. Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Thanks.
I didn't make too many because I didn't know if but I'd be happy to make any and all. So really, the police and fire departments both have outgrown their current facility. Multiple evidence by multiple renovations that have been done to the building to accommodate the growing departments, installing petitions to make more but smaller rooms, even converting a closet into a kitchen. But for a more in-depth look, I'm not going to belabor that. For a more in-depth look at the current facility, please go to our website. We have a web page set up for this project at Planning and Sustainability Exeter Public Safety Complex Analysis. And we've done I'd like to thank the chiefs for that. They did a narrated video walkthrough of each of the departments, highlighting all the areas and the current state of the facility. So, as well as all the other studies and other documents are on that web page as well. So all the documents that you created. So just want to back up real briefly, want to go over some studies. In 2001, this kind of, I only went back 20 years. Maybe there was discussion before that, but Fire Infrastructure Study Report was done in 2001 by FireScope. The study focused on fire response times and examined the need for an additional fire station. It didn't look at the existing facility, but it recommended a second station to, quote, provide better coverage to the residential area north of 101 and still provide coverage to the Epping Road corridor. They also recommended the examination of a third station in the western area of town, and there was some preliminary discussions when Riverwoods went in, but that's not something we're pursuing. Out of that study, a fire substation did go before the voters in 2003, but it was not voted in. But I do want to remind, when they said provide better coverage and recommended the second station at 101, Epping Road was very different back then. I mean, just in the last, since I've been here, we've added almost 540 residential units within a stone's throw of Continental Drive, and including a gourmet popcorn facility, a Unitil facility, and other commercial establishments. So that corridor has also seen a lot of growth since this study was done. Fast forward to 2007. Next, please. There was an organizational effectiveness and efficiency study of the fire department done by MMA Consulting Group. The study was primarily geared towards staffing levels and the examination of a second station, probably in response to the Warren article and so forth, and how it went to maybe need more study. And they recommended that the town acquire enough land in Epping Road area to enable the town to construct a second fire station in the future. And they also made several recommendations to increase staffing levels, which some of them have been implemented since then. And in 2010, I think in response, the town looked at several different parcels, but in 2010, the town purchased 6 Continental Drive with the intention of it being for future public safety use. And then fast forward about 8 years, but since then it's been in the CIP. The substation has been in the CIP, but it's never gotten any traction to get on to the warrant. So we've kind of held back. Let's do the master plan update, and then out of the master plan, two of the action items. The main one was resolve outstanding issues with the public safety department facilities through a comprehensive public safety services evaluation that includes recommendations. And that really led to the December 2020 study that was done. It was a fire staffing and deployment analysis by the Center for Public Safety Management, or CPSM. It did focus mainly on staffing and deployment, but did dedicate a section on a facility discussion, which is section 6 in the report, and where CPSM discussed the needs and standards for both police and fire. The report identified several challenges with the current facility, including a general lack of administration space. The training room doubles as an emergency operations center, which is not best practice. One shower area to 5 to 8 staff on duty. Storage areas have more than reached capacity for both fire and police. Little to no ADA accommodations, which has been highlighted in other studies. The fire department apparatus garage is at capacity. The town's backbone for IT, not only for fire and police, is located in a closet where they built off the building. It's actually brick on one side. It actually was outside, and they built this little, so that's our backbone of our IT, located in the closet storage area. And the dispatch area is very tight and undersized with the amount of dispatchers they have there. So from that, the the study recommended the town conduct a space needs assessment and provided site options for the town to explore. So that brings us to 2020 with the warrant was mentioned to do just that, for a program and site evaluation for a public safety complex. Town issued an RFQ, with working in coordination with the Facilities Advisory Committee, and we selected LaValle Brensinger Architects to work with the town. 4 documents have been created to date, which is a programmatic needs assessment for both fire and police, an evaluation of site options, and a conceptual budget for the 3 top recommended options. And these documents are all available on our website, and I sent them to you as well. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Rob Robichek from LaValle Brensinger Architects. And I'll pass the mouse to him. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I've been in this room since we had the interview, so, is this working? Yeah, it is. So, thanks, everybody. I wanted to, give a quick background as to, what we've done to date and what still is left to be done. What we've done to date, we're about halfway through the study at this point. So what we have done, starting, I believe it was in November, Chiefs, I think it was in late October, early November, we started out doing some of the key initial steps in the process. I'm gonna take about 30 minutes to go through this. It's about 3.5 months worth of work. So I was telling our chair that who's an architect, I would spend 10 hours doing this, right? But I'm gonna go through it at a reasonable pace. You guys all have the documents and we can answer any questions, of course. So we did a building assessment. We walked through kind of a high level assessment with our engineering and architectural team. We generated a conditions report, which you folks have, and I'm assuming has been shared. And then at the same time we were doing that, we started the programming process. So we first came up with the programming questionnaires. We do a lot of public safety work, as you know, from hiring us. That's my specialty. And we shared the questionnaires and the process with the command teams of both the fire and police. We had a kickoff meeting to do that. Then we had about 2 or 3 weeks to fill that information in. I just as the chiefs gave me some kudos, I have to give you guys kudos because they were great at filling that information out. Sometimes getting that feedback is a struggle in some communities. So we did a good job of doing that together. We collect the data. We take it as raw data in those forms. We sift through it. We have we have at least 2 additional meetings to go through it, and came up with space programs for both fire and police as 2 entities, regardless of whether they end up sharing a building or not, just as a raw product looking at the police and fire needs, okay? Those programs that I'm gonna just talk about the summary of those really represent the current and future needs looking approximately 20 years out. When we do programming, whether it's for a town hall or police or fire, we always look, at least you look 20 years out. Beyond that point, the windshield gets pretty muddy, So we're looking at staff growth, we're looking at apparatus needs changing or not changing. We're looking at best practices of similar towns and cities that have police and fire departments. So, and what we did then is take that information, that data, and it told us the metrics we needed to be able to apply it to the various sites that we were asked to look at. And we did so in a very deliberate manner. It's objective, it's not subjective, because that told us what size the buildings need to be. It told us the number of parking spaces we need. We told us the apparatus bays we need. It told us all the things we needed to be able to look at these sites and make some informed decisions about which sites would be best suited to fit a combination of these functions. And that's all in the report, and I'll go through them briefly tonight. Once we did that, we recommended 3 options that we felt, based on our expertise, were, in our opinion, the best options. Of course, the community has to weigh in, the committee has to weigh in, everybody has to weigh in, but I think the folks that worked on our side of the table agree that those are the 3 options that we are putting forth as the best possible options going forward, barring any other sites that we're not aware of. We then took those and did a rough order of magnitude number on those based on similar projects in the region using a professional cost estimator that's on our team. We didn't do the architects open the book and look at the numbers kind of thing. Now, what's important to understand before I go into this is these are not designs. These are not designs. The next step of this would be to have additional meetings, whether it's community meetings or whatever you'd like to do, and then eventually come up with an option that we can develop for the final concept, and that will be the last piece of the study, and then we'll cost load that option as well, or options if it's two separate buildings. Everybody with me so far? Okay, great. So, next please. All right, so I'm gonna talk briefly about the two programs, just I'm only looking at the summary pages. Next please. There we go, thanks. Oh, yes, that's correct. So we did the program for the fire. We went through multiple iterations of this to make this thing as efficient as possible. So looking at the program, we looked at that very critically with the chief and his command staff. We were very lean and mean and didn't just put stuff in to put stuff in. This is based on best practices and standards that are in the industry today and going forward. So basically what it did, and I wish I had I guess the pointer does work, right? The pointer? Oh, actually this works. Wait, the wrong clicker. There we go. So that does work.
No, that's, okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't flip the pages, but go ahead.
Okay.
They work.
So as you'll see here, it pointed to a overall program 20 years out, which is what we use for the site test fits, okay? Both for police and fire. It was approximately 22,278 rough square feet. That's gross square footage. And if you look at what the building, what it is now, the fire takes approximately 13,437 feet on two different levels. So it shows a growth of approximately 166% 20 years out.
Before you get there.
Yeah.
First of all, that chart's different from ours. There's another chart in there there's another column called reference.
Yeah, we took that out because it doesn't really apply to this. That's our internal calculations. So we took that out because it doesn't apply to this.
Okay, that's fine. The second question I have is, the current needs, there's no chart there or no column there for what the current conditions are. Whether it's for us to understand that, which I think we do, or whether it's for the people to understand that, you need to set that baseline, because part of the legitimate argument for this is, hey, things are tough, and this is how it looks on that chart. The video is going to go a long way to helping that, but
So
right now, when you say,
here,
here, let me finish. When you say current need, that's your opinion, but it doesn't address now what the current baseline is. And by the way, according to CPMS or CPSM or whatever the heck it's called, the current configuration for the police department is 6,000. It's not, and for the fire department, it's 11,560. So I don't know where you got the 13,000 umpty squat, but if you're going to in part refer to the CPSM study as part of the justification for why you do this, you've got to make sure that the numbers match. And those numbers are pretty significant because people are going to have to make a judgment at whatever proposal, option, you name it, whether the town can A, afford, or B, wants to have an X% increase in space. I understand, standards and best practices and all that. But, a lot of people are going to first ask, is this better, or how much better is this than the current situation? And that's lost. And you don't mean this to be this way, but simply saying the current need begs the question of where we are now.
So can I respond?
Sure.
Okay, so the current need is what the programmatic requirement would be now, based on current staffing and apparatus. The number you see there was taken off the existing drawings for the building that we measured using computers. So I can't speak about the other study, but we'll double check that number. That's where that came from.
Okay, well,
Okay.
it's garbage in, garbage out, okay? We're only as good as the information that
Okay.
we get. And the town spent $50,000 on the CPSM study because they thought it was important to get an analytical
Yep.
baseline that would hopefully inform the decision about what kind of facilities are needed. And for you to just dismiss that by saying.
Well, I'm not dismissing, I'm saying we got off the drawings.
Okay.
We'll check it, I made a
You
note
know
right
where I'm
here.
going with this.
Yep. Okay.
So Bob, just to follow up, so that column that we have on ours, that's called reference, whatever, that's the existing condition right now, right?
No, that's just an
No.
internal calculation that we took out, and it was done
Oh.
internally, and we should have taken it off before we shared it. I took it off on that presentation, I didn't want to be confusing.
Okay, so
Okay.
Peter, what you're talking about is that they should add a column, so existing conditions.
Yeah, they should get
Yeah.
rid of the, absolutely get rid of the reference column.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
whether or not you had time to get us the right,
Yeah.
is.
That's fine, I misunderstood what you were
Material.
saying.
Yeah.
What I'm referring to is the number in red, was what we got off the drawings by doing calculations using a computer based on existing floor plans of the building,
Okay.
versus what was red, fire versus blue. Now, we'll double check it, I made a note here to double
Okay,
check.
because it's
but-
gonna change the percentage increases. It's
I
it's
totally
gonna be a-
understand that.
It's gonna be a tough sell even
Yeah.
to do the numbers in red in
Yep.
terms of percentage increases. But when people go back to what they thought was the baseline in the CPSM study, and they do the calculations from there,
Mm-hmm.
then it's gonna be an even tougher sell.
Sure, no, I understand. We'll double check, I'm just telling you how we did it.
Yep.
We'll double check it, and some of the stuff was actually in the report that we did on the conditions. The color, anyway,
I don't recall CPSM ever looking at the original floor plans from 1978. We actually dug them out for this.
Okay.
And obviously, they're all changed and different now, so we would go and measure everything and do that right.
That's good to know, chief, but we spent $50,000 for a study then which used the wrong baselines if they didn't do what you said they didn't do.
And CPSM's main focus was not on the building.
I understand that, but they had an important piece on the facilities, and they tried to make the case that you guys want to make here and we want to make here. And you can't just dismiss it as not credible because they didn't look at the original plans. All right, that's not good enough. You're going to have to come up with if you're going to reestablish a different baseline, you're going to have a good reason. And I think you gave it, but it does call into question how much faith we can have in the prior study. So, I'm not certain what the number is, what the right number is. But you understand my point.
we'll double check the number, that's how we came to it. So we'll double check it again, I can't speak for the other study, and we definitely didn't dismiss it, I just want the record to show that. But we'll double check it. So anyway, he points out to a 2040 approximate, the 20 years out roughly, of about 22.78. A large part of that, fire, of course, is apparatus areas and support areas for the apparatus. If there is a substation, that program came out to about 5,847, and if a substation would be built, that number would come off of the total fire central station number. With me? Right, okay. Let's see if this, I think this works, let's try it. Uh-oh. I'm not sure what happened there. Seemed to work once, but. No, let's just use the mouse, it's better. Next, please. So, in doing so, we did a detailed analysis, working with the chief and his department of not only the parking spaces required, and it's clearly noted as visitors, admin staff, et cetera, and it comes up with a total, but also we looked at the apparatus piece by piece. There was discussions about how the apparatus could be housed in bays of various sizes, because one of the key issues with the current facilities, the bays are undersized by current standards. So, without getting off into detail there, we did try to identify on the far right the number of bays required and so forth. In the red box at the bottom, it talks about a total of 5 bays, but with smaller bays for the ambulance EMS. However, if a substation is built, some of those bays will come off the central station, and 2 bays, an EMS bay, I believe, Chief, and a regular apparatus size bay, would move out of the central station, lowering the number of bays in a central station. Everybody with me? Okay.
Yes, but do you have any numbers on what it currently is?
Yes.
Am I missing it?
The facility now, the number of bays it has.
Bays and parking spaces?
Yeah, I mean, the existing is existing. I mean, again, we understand what it is.
No, I just don't
But-
know what it is.
Oh, actually, I think one of the plans we have might show that
Okay.
because it shows the existing
Wanna get
parking
it.
lot configuration. But the idea of this program is it stands on its own and becomes our guideline for what we do in the site analysis. The current
Yeah.
site plan, I believe one of the plans you'll see later actually shows that parking lot,
Okay.
the way it is now.
Yeah,
So-
it's hard to compare them.
Yeah, so I think what your document is exactly what you're saying, it's your program.
Correct.
But I think what we're also looking at is how this gets presented to the public.
Yeah.
So how it gets presented,
Sure.
this is where, so you have your document, then there may be a summary where you show what we're asking, existing.
Yeah, we can
2021.
actually add it to the sheet.
Yeah, so
that
I
would be
mean,
great.
because we're also looking at is how, us being the public, is how others
Yeah.
can take this, right? So we're looking at this different ways, but.
Yeah, no, I understand. And the current parking, of course, is shared by the 2 departments. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, and you could divide it however you wanted to,
Yeah.
or put it like that.
Yeah.
Since one of your plans hinged on there not being enough parking, I felt like it was a really important thing to have how many parking spaces there are now
Yeah.
versus how many they want to have.
Yep.
They hinged on that. Yeah. So I wanted to know, yeah.
You're absolutely right. But it's not.
Yep.
That's what drives it.
We can actually add that later to that chart. It's kind of the program itself tends to not, we looked at the gross footage of the existing versus proposed, but we can definitely add the parking existing. We'll have to decide exactly which parking is fire and which one is his PD, which is a whole different story, but we
staff
can
and-
show that.
Yeah.
Next, please.
And sorry, just on this page,
Yeah.
maybe this is a question for Chief Wilking. All these are the equipment that you currently own?
Correct.
Okay. And the museum steam engine is in the building there?
The museum steam engine we brought up as an important feature to the fire department, and that's a discussion we're gonna need to have as a community moving forward, especially if the discussion revolves around what we're gonna do with that 32 Court Street piece of property, because it's housed in the museum today,
Yeah,
so.
that's right.
So we'll discuss that whole aspect of the relevance, the importance of that at the time, but.
Thank you.
Next, please. So the police, again, the number, just to discuss it the way we did the fire, the number you see there came from the floor plans that we had on all levels. We worked with the chiefs and the staff to identify which was police, which was fire. Then we did calculations off the drawings that we had, the original 1970s drawings. So we'll double check those numbers, again,
By the
but,
way, that's page 84 of the CPSM study. Has both the PD facilities at 6,000 square feet and the fire department as 11,560 square feet. So if you go to page 84, that's where it is.
okay. And it could very well be that there's a discrepancy in that report. I can't vouch for that report. I can only vouch for what we do, but we're not ignoring it, but it could be discrepancy. We'll double check it again because we have the drawings and we do the calcs right off those drawings using Revit, so. Anyway, so you see the growth need there, pointing to about 17.7, 20 years out. So you can see the growth that's involved there. One of the reasons I think here that the growth for PD was greater than the fire is also because the apparatus bays, while being undersized, they're still apparatus bays, while the police doesn't have that kind of a large space. So you see the growth being incrementally larger programmatically based on needs than the fire was percentage-wise. Even if these numbers, we'll double check them again, but even those numbers are not exactly correct. Well, I'm not saying they're not correct, but if they're not. All right. Next, please. The police had a larger parking requirement, which was actually very important to looking at sites. because you're dealing with staff, you're dealing with cruisers and police vehicles. And then you're dealing, of course, with public parking, and then also a small auto impound two-vehicle area, which adds up to nearly 51 little spaces on the ground. So that is a major deciding point in how police would fit on a couple of different sites.
And what is the current number that has?
Police parking?
Yeah.
I can't tell you right now. I didn't calculate. I'd have it, but I don't have it with me right now. We know what the total number of spaces are at the current facility.
Okay.
You know.
If you know that, what is it?
I don't have it right now with me
Oh, I
in front
see.
of me.
Okay.
But we're gonna have a plan that was gonna actually show that, so we can actually count it. Because one of the options actually shows the plan just the way it is right now.
Okay.
Okay, next please. And again, the program document was meant to live on its own rather than a comparative thing. We generally compare the existing, there is an existing building, we'll compare that just to give a benchmark on that. The parking, we did not compare necessarily against what's there.
Okay.
Because in the end, the need is the need. So, you know, so,
The need is what the voters of Exeter say is the need.
okay,
Okay? We rely on the expertise of the police and fire department to inform that decision, and that you should reflect that.
yeah,
But you gotta understand, and that's why I think we're kind of emphasizing making sure that people understand the baseline. Is so so then they can ask the questions of how much parking is enough.
sure,
How much of this space is enough in total, or in pieces if they want to get into the details. So don't dismiss, where we are now, because most of the town sadly doesn't know it. And especially if you're going to suggest in all your options that you want to build a substation on Continental Drive or anywhere else. The substation hasn't hunted, as Dave said, since 2003. And I'd be surprised if anybody comes up now and says, well, it's more affordable now, let's do it. I hope I'm wrong if that's the option that you guys ultimately, or we ultimately decide to approve. But you gotta factor things like that in, and maybe that's not your job, maybe that's our job.
Well, first I want to say on the record again, we're not dismissing anything or discounting anything. There's major issues with the current parking the way it is right now, including security and other things that were in the MRI report as well. So the current parking situation, while, allowing people to park, is by no means an ideal situation as far as police security, separating public from police vehicles and police staff, as well as fire. So, but we'll benchmark the existing just like we will for the fire. Make sure, because we're benchmarking the building as well. Next, please. So the next thing is a summary of sites. These are the sites we were asked to look at. One was the Court Street site where the current building is. And there were multiple, options. I'm not gonna read through everything because you guys have the report, but basically for 20 Court Street, we were looking at a new meaning a new building. A combined public safety building, it's a combined. It also could be a fire only, a new building, or as you'll see, renovation addition to the existing building, or PD only, which would be in the same site. And I'm gonna go through those briefly in a minute. For Continental Drive, we're looking at a new PD possibly combined with with a substation, a small substation for fire, which was basically a small living quarters operational area with a larger bay, I believe, Chief Hooking, and then a smaller EMS bay. And possibly, so there was fire only, PD only substation, fire substation only, or a combined PD and a substation, which we showed in some of the diagrams, understanding there could be any of those items, okay? And Holland Way, which you're familiar with, that's an interesting property, and we looked at that for a main fire station or a combined new facility. That site, and I'm gonna mention this now, Dave, was originally considered and studied for a water filtration plant. It's adjacent to the Exeter Gun Club. It has some challenges, but it's a good site. For fire, as you'll see a little bit later, but I'll just say now, there's issues, I think, of coverage. So I think if fire were to go there with their main facility, you probably would need for coverage area, and actually MRI said this too, would need a substation probably on Continental Drive to cover that heat mapping of service. Assuming that would be no police, there'll be no fire at the current location, not where it is.
Can I just ask a follow-up?
Absolutely.
So that was one of my questions, that, and this is, Chief, for you, is that what is the location to avoid a substation? Is it where it is now in central town? Or, I mean, because that's I think has to be a little bit more communicated as far as, how to avoid that. Is there an option, I guess, to avoid more than one
Right.
fire station? So, you want to speak to that?
So the answer to that is the only location that we've looked at, and in my 18 years in Exeter, that would allow us to function and cover 85% of the town with the response we have, is somewhere in the downtown core.
Okay.
That around 20 Court Street or any place in this general area. However, we have argued for years about the needs of the town outside the downtown core, that we are not meeting the response needs. So when you ask the question, what is the location that we would never need a substation, that location does not exist.
Yeah, I
But
asked a
I
loaded
understand the
question, yeah.
premise of the question.
Well,
No, thank you. Yes, I asked a lot of questions. Yeah, so I guess exactly in a way to maybe minimize the need for a substation. And then just to follow up, so Chief Woolen, for you, you had in one of the first option said police does fit on site, but the preference is to give priority to the fire department. Is it because of that comment that you felt like you could give the fire department should stay at 20 Court?
Sure, I mean, police can go wherever. Our patrol cars are constantly patrolled.
Okay.
So we're not going out from a main location. Obviously, we want to be where we can have access to the community, walk-ins, and, people know where we are, in reports and things like that, but logistically, we can operate from anywhere in the town.
All right, great, thanks.
So that was a good question, and also as you get into the options, while we show a combined facility there on Continental because it's larger footprint, it doesn't have to be, it could just be police only. So that's a good point that you made.
yeah, but how come that never made your final three options?
It's an option within the option.
It is an option 3. It says combined PD and FD.
Well, but I don't believe in any of the options does it say just PD. You've said it here.
So we're gonna get.
Listed it,
Yeah.
but I didn't see that, so.
Okay.
Did I just miss that? Did you have an actual separate option that simply said PD only?
I don't think that's what he said.
Well, yeah, it says it here, new PD in Continental Drive.
It is an option to create.
Yeah, so let's get through the
Okay.
presentation of the options, and then we'll dig into
Right,
that
so
more.
because
Okay.
we looked at it as a test fit, again, these are not designs. So we felt that if the PD with a small FD substation fits, the PD easily fits because it's a little bit smaller, right? So, anyway,
So this is the evaluation, this isn't the preferred order of
exactly.
options yet, so we'll get
Exactly.
there.
No, that's there, I understand.
So number 4, which was added kind of later, was the 32 Court, which of course you're familiar with. It's the rec building in the senior center, the rec department. That really was only looked at it for PD because it's too small to really accommodate a central fire station. It's not large enough. So I'm not going to go through the phasing, but there's a bunch of different phasing options. But basically, the gist of the phasing is that if we're going to stay in the current location with fire, and the PD's built, PD would move out, and you could renovate that facility and add on to it. The current location will not accommodate the programmatic requirements 20 years out for police and a fire. We show that in one option that we don't recommend. So I'd like to go through those if we might. To your point, and then we can answer any questions. So let's go to the recommended options. So the first one, you're gonna notice this as that the one at the top, which is for Continental Drive, is kind of a steady one through all 3 of them. And again, to the committee members' comments, we looked at the combined, not because we didn't think it would, because we didn't want to look at the police only, but we were trying to test for the largest amount of parking required and the largest footprint on that site. The two absolutely can be divorced. And if the fire stays in downtown, you potentially may or may not need that substation. You know, that's a decision that's been looked at by MRI, by other studies you've done, okay? So the first option would be putting a new two-story police with a substation. It could be simply just the police, of course. And it talks about the footages there. And on 20 Court Street, we would do is once the police would move out, is to retain a piece of the building, which is really the police side, and then remove the rest of the building, the apparatus living quarters and the office for the fire, and build a new one-story space that would house that. So to your question, you see the number of bays that would be there, which is 4 larger bays and then smaller EMS bays. That would happen with the substation. If the substation was built, it would be slightly smaller. Okay? So that was option number one. It keeps fire downtown. It keeps a piece of the current building, but provides the apparatus bays are the biggest issue, and because of how the current building's built, the apparatus bays and the living quarters and some of the offices are all tied together, you know, within that piece of the building. While the police is sort of its own sort of thing within that building, physically.
So there could be, so option one, you have the police and a substation at Continental Drive and
Yes.
renovating existing. So we could suggest that the substation be a future expansion,
That is correct.
and so then you could update the cost. And
Yeah, absolutely correct. Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
Peter, was this your question? Could you build a combined police and fire at Continental Drive?
No, my question is, it actually gets to the cost. Maybe you can decide how you want to do this, but I would recommend that with each option, we also have the cost slide, so that we can sit there and
Sure.
see how much it's going to cost to do options A, B,
Sure.
and C. And also, I guess, I have some questions about the cost that, I don't know, you want to do them at the end?
How easy is it to navigate back and forth? We're kind of seemingly, I don't
Okay,
know if we're limited
never mind.
here. What's that?
I'm right here, I can flip around. We do have a slide that has all the options with the prices.
I guess, I just want to make sure we don't get too bogged down on one option and one price. I'd like to cover,
Okay,
how about if we cover the options first and then we can delve into the pricing?
Got it.
I just want to make sure we give
Yep.
enough coverage to everything.
Do you want us to wait on questions too, Chris, or on the, not pricing, but just in the material we have?
Clarification, only.
If they're quick,
Yeah.
throw them out.
Okay, all right, good.
But if it's a longer item, let's save it, write it down.
Okay.
okay.
And I think also people have to remember, these are very conceptual numbers at this point, because we haven't designed anything yet. These are based on test fits and some similar benchmark kind of projects in the industry in northern New England, right? And they're also benchmarked for a certain timeline within the procurement timeline, and it says so on the budgets,
Yep, we'll
right?
get to that.
So,
I just need to ask another generic question,
Sure.
about parking. So what is the thought process about parking garages with police and fire? Is that a no-no because of security issues, or?
do you mean on grade combined, or do you mean?
Like underneath the building type?
Right. So structured on-grade parking is running in the neighborhood of about $2,500 to $3,500 a space.
Yeah.
On grade.
Yeah,
Structured parking is a neighborhood of $30,000
sure,
a
so I
space.
understand the pricing. I'm
Right,
talking
so-
about program, as far
So,
as design.
so generally we try to avoid doing that kind of a thing, unless there's mitigating circumstances that would indicate that we absolutely want to park underneath a building. Underneath the fire bays, you've got, of course, a very heavy equipment, so you wouldn't want to do it under that. So you might do it under the office area or the living quarters.
Right.
But it's quite expensive to do.
Yeah, cost aside, I didn't know if there was a security. recommendation because of security.
Right now, your parking is a combined of police and fire. It's not secured. Anybody can go back there.
Okay.
It's something, we would never design a new facility or renovated addition facility, to answer your question, so what's there now is not what we recommend. Plus, there's some parking in the front, which is kind of visitors parking, but it was an area that was not originally parking. right?
Yeah.
So if it's police vehicles only, if you put a sally port underneath, that could be done.
Okay.
But it also depends a lot on the geotechnical results of a geotech study of that site. Let's say we decide on Continental that, this is role play, I'm not saying you do this. We decide that, well, we want to park underneath the building there for the police, but we do some geotech and find out it's ledge, we're probably not going to want to do that.
No, I know, it's just a big,
Does that make sense?
no, it definitely does, and I understand the cost is considerably more, but it's also a big space saver. And it's also, there's a sustainable approach about that. Too.
Right.
So
It's generally expensive to do.
Yep.
Could you do it operationally? Yes.
Okay, that's good.
If it's secured, and there are
Yep.
urban sites where in a big city where people have done that.
I just didn't know with a police station, if it was not a good idea to have.
No, if it's secured parking, well, if it's not secured, it's totally not a good idea. If it's secured parking, yes, it's okay.
Got it. Thanks.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. Option two? Option two, basically, keeps the standard, that you see on Continental Drive. And again, it could be a police only, or it could be a police in a substation. And in this situation here, the existing public safety building would be demolished and a new one-story, facility would be built for fire. Chief, I don't know if you want to say a couple of words about why a one-story, because this is operational efficiency, why a one-story is better than a two-story or multi-story fire station. Because that was based on input from command staff and from the chief.
One of the things that was addressed in the CPSM study when they looked at the efficiency side of the firehouse is that we are falling behind and not meeting some national benchmarks. And one thing that both MRI through LaValle Brensinger noticed and CPSM was that the design of the station has a lot to do with our ability to get out of the station. And
Yes.
the station built in 78, 2 stories, and I've narrated it in the video, so I'm not gonna belabor it, but leaving the second story from kitchen, training, or bunk rooms to get to the apparatus floor adds time. And our average is about 124 seconds, or 2 minutes, 4 seconds, and the benchmark is 80 to 90 seconds. So you see, we're already a minute slow just getting out because of the station. So we have encouraged LaValle Brensinger to explore as many one-story options as humanly possible, understanding these these space needs on the site. So.
Yeah. And the last option, again, the Continental Drive is a standard through all, and again, repeating that, it could be a police only, or it could be combined with a small substation. And then on Holland Way, there's a drawing on the next page, would indicate that a one-story new fire station. Now, I would say that if the fire department were to locate their main station there, you would need, I think Chief Wilking will agree to that, you would need a substation probably on Continental Drive because of the area coverage and the fact that now the central station would be a little bit farther out of the center of the city. Town. So these were the three options that made the most sense. To get to those, we looked at all the other options. I'm not really gonna dwell on those. I mean, you have all those. Rest assured that a police only on Continental would be not an issue. It would easily fit. There's a lot of things that we look at when we look at both fire and police, and you just touched on that. For police, we look for a minimum separation of public visitors away from police vehicles, police staff in impound. So we wanna keep the visitors separate. We don't even want to pass across if it's possible. For the police parking, for both staff and for cruisers and police vehicles, we look for a minimum of 2 means out of that property for safety and for egress. And we also look at separating the police parking for both staff and cruisers and other vehicles that you might have to be protected by fencing and a gate so that public cannot go back there. So we designed the station to be very community friendly and welcoming, but we put the business end away from that so we could separate the traffic. So that's some of the key drivers in looking at any property that we would develop for a new police station. So to go back to your question that you had asked earlier, the current parking lot is just in the back of the building. It's got a camera on it or whatever, but it's not a secured environment by modern standards. Okay? So, David, I wasn't gonna go through each one of these, but basically the highlights were, and I'm gonna go over here, you probably can hear me fine. We looked at.
Can you bring the mic, because it's for TV?
Oh, it is? Okay, sorry. Oh, it's portable. Okay. Wow, you're like a rock star. So, can you hear me now? Okay. So, the first thing we looked at was a combined PDFD at Court Street. You can see the pros and cons, and again, I'm not gonna go into those, but the reality is that the current program that's projected out for 20 years out simply would not really fit on that site. And all the parking requirements that we talked about, even if we were to, put parking out of the building or parts of it. Next, please. So you can kind of see how large it is, and actually, there's approximately 28 to 30 existing spaces right now in the back. Plus, there's more parking a little bit, here in the front. But that parking was done at a later time, but it's still there. I parked there several times when I came to the building. We don't recommend the idea of doing a combined facility at the site for the current program. It would be very large. We looked at the existing site for FD fire only, and that does work. We talked about the fact that it could be a new facility. We talked about the fact that it could be a renovation addition once the police moves out. So that does work on the site, and it does give you the apparatus bays you need, and it does give the parking requirement for fire and for visitors. Next, please.
And that's based on the one-story?
Well, I think because we're trying to keep a piece of the current building in one of the options, that was option one. That's a two-story facility.
Okay.
So we would try to keep that. Again, this is not a design, but it's just a conceptual idea, is to say, we do want to make a gesture to the community and also to the project to save money, to keep a piece of the building, which would be the two-story police piece that's there now, which could potentially become fire offices. We haven't really tested that to that level yet because we're looking for guidance on a preferred option, but it would work. And then a one-story addition, correct. That's exactly right.
But if it gets replaced with all new, it's a one-story building?
Correct. It would take, just to repeat what I said earlier, because of how the building was constructed in the 70s, you've got the bays, the fire offices, and then the sleeping quarters that kind of tied together. So we would basically, we have to look at it further, obviously, if this is the option to go with, is to keep the police two-story piece, demolish the existing, and then build a new one-story area that has living quarters, support spaces, bunker, decon, all the functions that fire needs, and then the apparatus space.
Did you ever consider just renovating the entire building for the fire department? As opposed to building a new one-story?
Well, we did, but operationally, the reason for that is that the bays just aren't functional for future use. They're kind of minimal as it is right now. So because the apparatus bays make the bulk of that space, it didn't seem to make sense to try to play, and also it's how the building was built originally.
But if you renovate, you can do whatever you want inside.
Well-
So, let me finish.
Yep.
And if you did that, if you believe you need larger bays, it's probably a lot less complicated and a lot less expensive to build an addition to the building to increase the size of the bays than it is to build a whole new one-story building. And I understand the operational issues, but I'm trying to get at what you looked at. And the answer is you did. That's okay.
So if you, it's a great question. So if you look at the conditions assessment that we did, in the structural piece of that, it addresses some of these limitations and architectural limitations that we'd be faced with to do that. So we looked at that actually because you're right, if it could do that, it'd be great, but our initial opinion on it was that it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to do that.
And that's not presented here. So you could present that to help make people
Sure.
understand why it's a bad idea.
Right.
And why, if we did just keep the fire department in
Right.
the current
Right.
envelope, if you will, why it
Yes.
really does make sense
Yeah.
to go with a one-story building.
Absolutely. So I think that the presentation to the community, and I see where you're coming from, and I agree with that, would be crafted a certain way that this particular thing really wasn't. It was really meant as a presentation of just what we did to date, but we do a lot of community presentations, so to your point, whatever's presented to the community has to be crafted as such to get that point across. without having to go through a 50-page existing conditions report, right? So that's the crux of it, right?
Well, that might be the least of your issues when it comes to presenting to the community.
Sure, but I mean, you make a good point, because there has to be an understanding why we just aren't trying to, jigger around with what's there, why that wouldn't really work. And it has a lot to do with the codes that building was built under, which is like 5 structural codes ago, things of that nature, which makes a big difference. So the next one was looking at PD only at court. I mean, honestly, we didn't test fit that because it would easily fit there, because the program is quite a bit smaller than the fire. So we know it's going to fit, so we didn't actually draw it. Next, please. Whoops. So a Continental Drive here, oh, by the way, so here's a PD only at Continental Drive. So I knew it was in there because we looked at it. So the reason we showed what we did in option 1, 2, and 3 that we recommend is that we just thought we would show that because it's larger, but it could easily be retooled to show PD only, but there it is, it fits well. And the visitors is green, the police is in kind of a purple lilac color, but it has all the things that we talked about in terms of security for parking, separating public from police, etc. It works really well. So it's a really good site for that. So if you think that for the community presentation you want to show any of the options police only, we absolutely could be done, because we did test fit it.
Well, again, we all might have different opinions on.
That's fine, but
So
we're very flexible. It's how you want to present. The Continental Drive for fire substation only, we don't recommend really that. I mean, basically, we knew the history, in the past with that, and we felt that since you're maybe building a new police facility there, it would be much more efficient to do that at the same time rather than coming later and do it. Because you already have every trade there already doing it, if that's something that the town wants to do.
Can you build just the PD with the hooks in it for eventual additions?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it could be. We haven't designed it, but absolutely, it could be done later.
Okay.
But I
But
think
you could put in the hooks, or you could make provisions for it so that
Right.
when the town, if the town decides it doesn't want to take the trip now, the town can be presented X number of years later, and they don't have to.
Sure.
They don't have to hear, oh, we can't do that because we didn't build in this or that or the other.
Oh, no, we would site the building in such a manner, we just slide it to the right a little bit like you saw in the other one, so that you could come and do the bays and do the fire piece. It could be done. I think in terms of cost, though, while it is a little bit more expensive, it would make a lot of sense to do it all at once if you're ever going to do it, because it's going to be more cost effective when everybody's there doing all that work. But the answer is yes, so it could be done. All we would do is we would show it, Dave, as a dotted line of saying, future 2-bay, fire substation. Not a problem. The Continental Drive for the, okay, so I'm sorry, so the Continental Drive for the PD and with a FD substation, this is what you see basically as that benchmark in every one of the recommended options. So next, please. Thank you, Dave. No, I do without Dave here doing that. So we don't recommend that site for the fire main station. It's tight. It does sort of barely work. We don't recommend it, and I'm not going to dwell on that. If we thought it was a good idea, we would recommend it. Next, please.
Yeah, I don't know. That one's the one I felt like I had the most questions on.
It's very, very tight for moving apparatus. It sort of looks partially, barely feasible, but we don't recommend it. MRI didn't recommend. We don't recommend it. Our civil engineers didn't recommend it either, for a variety of reasons, to be honest with you. So.
Well, the chief might chime in. A single station, the railroad tracks, the farm.
Yeah.
I think that kind of does the same thing to the town that putting a fire central station on Holland Way does. It provides all of our assets on either the east side of town or the west side of town, and it kind of pulls us from that center core that the last 3 studies have all indicated is the absolute, area that we do most. It's a heat map that shows 80%, 85% of our calls. So you're almost destined, and again, we can go through several different options, but you move the central fire headquarters to Continental, some response assets have to stay available downtown. So do you now make a substation on the Court Street lot with the PD and that's your fire? Again, options are options, but there's just the question of what's most responsible.
We have concerns about that side as far as large apparatus movement. You can only go back in and out. There's a lot of reasons why we don't recommend it. So.
Do you have any questions, Amanda?
No, I mean, I'm still interested in hearing what the specific reasons are. Maybe now's not a time for it, or you can just give us an email with what they were. I'm just curious what they were.
It's
Not
really the
just-
size of the lot, and the size of the lot was restrictive. It just geometrically was not well suited. It's really quite that simple. And the operational piece that you just mentioned.
Yeah, no, that made sense, and with what Mark asked earlier, it sounded like either way, the recommendation is for a substation, so I instantly thought that same thing. I do understand that, obviously downtown is gonna be one of the most heavy uses, so probably the real main station should be downtown, but I just feel like I don't want to gloss over what the reasoning was.
Yeah.
Just as,
It's in
there
the
were
pros
more
and
things, but we don't need to go over them.
right.
I'm
It's in the
still
pros and
curious what
cons
they
too.
are.
It's in the pros and cons. I think we did a reasonable job of explaining
Okay.
why. But again, believe me, we came at this very open-minded. So if we didn't recommend it, we really didn't feel it was a good option for the variety of reasons.
I hear you.
Because we had no extra grind either way, right? So, okay, we're on to Holland Way. This is Dave's favorite lot. I'm joking, Dave. But it's a great property. This can accommodate a variety of things. It can accommodate a freestanding one-story central fire station that we talked about, or a combined public safety building, both police and fire. This shows it as a police and fire combined. It's plenty big, so it would fit. And also a new, I'm sorry, if you go to the next one, just the last one was the PD only at Court Street, 32 Court Street, because that lot is too small to accommodate a fire station. And the problem with the police station going on the property where the current wreck is, it falls way short of the parking requirements necessary, with no options that we could see around it for accommodating that parking.
Well,
So,
This is the Court Street 32?
yeah, that's police only, and
Rec center.
the diagram that's further in the study indicates specifically how many parking spaces were short, but also I believe in the prior page, it indicates that as well under the pros and cons.
so that includes taking down the fire museum and the senior center, correct?
That would be the whole thing, yep,
Cool.
yep. So I think when you look at the pros and cons, without getting overly wordy, we try to identify the key hotspots for each one of these and why we recommended something or we didn't.
So what drives that as non-viable is parking?
Is the parking requirement and the ability to separate the parking and secure the parking and provide the number of access points in and out that we felt is what we would look at based on best practices for a police department, a new building.
As a sole site of operation, it doesn't necessarily consider ancillary use or additional use.
Yeah. It was strictly police because we knew that we couldn't fit anything else really on there
Right.
with operational requirements around it, so.
Currently, how much of at some point it would be helpful to have a chart that'll show us where now police and fire staff park and where the police and fire vehicles park. I mean, we know they're off to the side and they're not undercover and there's.
The public parking across the street,
No, I don't-
probably,
yeah,
whatever.
I'd like to know what that is,
Yeah.
and how much of that's used by the staffs of both.
Yeah.
A, B, I understand why, nobody wants to have an uncovered location for parking so that the night detectives have to clean off for the day detectives the snow from the overnight. But it would be helpful to understand how many of those slots there are, and then how that relates to how many slots there are at 30/32 Court Street. Because, and I'll go into it a little later, But that's,
Yeah,
it'd be helpful to know.
If we can, I'd like to get to the pricing, because
Yep.
at 6
You can
o'clock.
provide that information.
Yeah,
on
well,
this
we-
parking
we have
where
time for
I'm sure the
questions and
town
stuff. I
can
just wanna-
provide that.
Yeah, no, that's
But
fine.
it's not as
That
simple as that,
also
because we're not
drives
people
the
parking
pricing.
between these two buildings,
Yeah.
and that's not where
I want
we're
to ask
at,
you program
you know,
questions too,
so.
Go ahead.
yeah.
All right, but we didn't recommend that. The side diagrams you've already seen, these are larger versions. You can see what you see in the upper left corner on number 1 is pretty much existing parking lot, to your point, you know? And I'm not gonna dwell on these because we've discussed them all at this point, but if you look at these in your packets, and it's hard to read here, it has very detailed parking counts that
Right,
our
yeah.
civil engineers and I did
You can't
together.
read
Can't
it,
read it.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
so. But it reflects the parking requirements, what's required, and you know, we could provide, David, we could print larger versions of these or whatever you might need, but we try to save paper, so we put them on, you know. Also, we wanted you to be able to see them side by side, which is really
Yeah,
good.
they're
to
just
see.
blurry, that's all.
Yeah, so. This is police only on Continental Drive, so we did do that, but it just, again, for your public presentation, we can retool that to show this only, or that in the fire substation. You know, we could talk about that, but we did look at that, and also, you can see the parking counts right there between police, public, and accessible. Next, please. Shows a central fire station on this property. We do not recommend that. It's very, very tight. Just the way the site is configured, it's not conducive to that. Next, please. This shows the police with a small fire substation that's approximately 5,800 square feet, including the apparatus bays. It fits really nicely. Also, you can separate fire is red for staff parking, green is public. But then once you get to this point right there in the back, it's secured parking, gated and fenced for police and police vehicles and police staff. And for the Sally Port and on-site temporary auto impound for a couple of vehicles, which is part of the program. Next, please. This one shows the parking, it shows the combined police and fire. It's a brand-new building on Holland Way. It involves some easement issues that we've been discussing, you know, with planning. And again, is that whole idea of that there was this water filtration plant study that was done, a whole design, right, David, that was done for that site. And if you built something on here, whether it's the central fire station, you know, it would change that opportunity for the future.
Dave, what's the timeline for that, or is that still being explored, or? I haven't talked to Jen about it, so I don't know.
It was designed in 2004, and that's all. It has not
Okay.
been rejuvenated. We are looking at, opening up groundwater sources, so looking at that. But my indication is it's always something that, is a potential need in the future. That's what I've heard.
I just wanted to mention that because Dave mentioned it to us, and I thought that since Dave mentioned it, I thought I
It
should.
does conflict.
Yeah.
It's right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just wanted, again, we're asked to test fit, we test fit it. We're not recommending necessarily that you build a brand new, combined facility there, but we want to see if it fit. You hired us to do that, and we want it to, it does fit, of course, because it's a big lot. Next, please. This is a new one-story central fire station with all the parking and the apparatus bays. In doing so, please note that the number of bays is reduced here because we pretty much knew right away that if you were to do this, you would absolutely have to do that substation on Continental Drive. So the number of bays we show here are one EMS bay and one apparatus large bay shorter than if everything stays downtown, right?
Would this one still impact the water filtration?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. it
Making
would.
sure, 'cause you didn't
It would. No, it's a good question, it would. Yeah.
You see the gun club
Yeah,
there?
just-
And it's just, that's where it was designed, right up front.
Yeah,
Okay.
it would. And last but not least, it's the police only, as a two-story facility on the recreation department and fire museum / senior center. And again, I would just say that what the parking is there now is one thing, but what the parking would have to be a functional, secure police facility is quite a bit different. So it's sort of not a tit for tat, it's really two different issues, So just to wrap this up, so again, I want to be sure that people understand what these budgets are and what they're not. These are just rough order of magnitude numbers that were done based on square foot numbers with our estimating firm, Jobin Consultants. Jobin is not just a cost estimator, they also do owner's representative and CM. So they're actually in the business up to their elbows. They're not just some guys pulling numbers out of a book. You know, this is important. However, what it's not is a detailed budget, because the idea would be to come up with an option and really develop that option to really get a much better understanding of these costs. So the way, whoops.
You're skipping the best part, Dave.
So next please. Yeah. So what we did was basically look at all the three recommended options. The fire, I did send that to you separately as a markup, but the fire substation was approximately 25 or 20. Do you remember what it was? About 25% of this cost would be the fire. I did have, Mark break that up separately because it's a little bit different, but I'm gonna go through this really briefly. We just looked at these from a standpoint of what items in the blue are Continental Drive for this option, and it has police, site development, a police station, fire substation, and a contingency of about 10%, which is standard in our industry because, again, we haven't designed anything yet. And then a construction management fee and general contractor fees and so forth. So that comes up with $1 per square foot, and then we usually using approximately 20% for soft costs, which includes geotech and environmental and architectural engineering fees, permitting fees, and a bunch of other stuff that adds up approximately to 18 to 20%. Again, we wanted to just be average what we're using in northern New England for these kinds of projects. They're quite a bit more than that south of the border. And that comes out with an overall number. So the overall number, so I wanted to look at the bottom of this, and do you have ability to point to that, Dave, or should I use this?
We see them, we
Yeah.
have prints.
Well, I wanted to point out to the fact that I had to tell Jobin something as to how to benchmark these things. So we benchmarked the police and substation, with or without substation, at a buyout in 2023 for mid-2023, so it'd be like early Q3, quarter three. So I had to tell them something. I couldn't just tell them, give me a budget. That's irresponsible, right? And then we looked at the Court Street as being mid-2025, so we figured about a 2-year lapse between the two, because you'd have to build the police, move the police out, and then be able to start the fire project. Make sense? So we just made that assumption. I understand that you might have different thoughts about it, but I had to tell our estimators something. And for the Court Street, it has a renovation, and then also a new construction. So it's broken out as a demolition of part of the existing building, about 10,000 square foot new, and then renovating the 7,000 rough square feet that mostly makes up the police part of the project.
So if the town decided that they recognizing it's suboptimal, recognizing it's, well, just that, suboptimal. If the town said, no, we just want you to renovate the entire building, do we substitute the 180 to 190 per square foot cost?
It'd be more than that, because that space that we'd be renovating is predominantly office space right now. And if you get into potentially, if it's feasible, and I think there's big question marks about that, on the operational parts of fire, that's gonna be much more intrusive renovation. So I don't think you can apply that number across. That was basically taking office space and so forth and just making it the same.
Sure.
Mechanical upgrades, things like that, and physical upgrades.
And if the town decided it didn't want to build the substation as part of the police station, that we can just drop the 1.95, and presumably some of the other costs
Yes.
would fall out as well.
Yes.
I asked him that same question, he actually did it, and
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
And again, for the presentation to the community, this is a way I would present to a committee like this, but for a community presentation, we can break that completely out It's really a direction we need from you prior to the community presentation in March or April. Sure. And also, we wanted to use a range. So you say, it's a low to high range based on what we're seeing in the marketplace right now. And then, of course, projecting it, as I said, to early Q3 of '23, just to be able to have a benchmark of some kind, right? So, but yeah, the answer is yes. Yep.
And then, just to clarify too, Bob, the existing Court Street,
Mm-hmm.
the fire apparatus bays are pretty much not viable for anything. So that's why those are gonna be demoed pretty much, whichever way.
Yes, and the other point too, Chris, is that the way the building was designed, part of the offices and also the living quarters are part of that. They're tied at the hip. So you can't just take a little piece of it out and leave the rest.
Yeah, my point being that trying to just renovate that whole facility is probably more, it's not as cost effective as demoing that portion.
Do you mean the whole thing, or do you mean the fire piece of it?
Whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is this, that when you add on to a building like that, okay, let's say we demo nothing, and this is role play, but we want to add, there's no room to add anything, but let's say you would add, I don't know, 3 ambulance bays at the back and more stuff. Anything we design would be to current structural is the biggest issue, to codes. This facility, which was built very sturdy for its time, was designed about 5 structural codes ago. And in the report that we did, that FBRA did as a part of the assessment, they mentioned that in that report. So once you add something old, new to something that old, there's a whole other compendium of things that come into it. And also to the level of design you want to do. Does the town want to have a category 4 survivable facility being reasonably coastal, or does it just want to do a commercial level structural design? We're not saying you should be a category 4. That's a self-determined issue, but that's another thing that comes into play.
Does that mean there's an assumption about survivability in each of these options?
This was the new building would be designed to what would be a category 4 type facility. Most of the fire stations or police stations we do these days for any municipality of any size tend to be a category 4 building. And what it is really a structural level of design.
Okay, help me understand, category 4 against what?
Just a standard commercial design in the International Building Code.
Okay, but it's got to be.
Which would be like you design an office building to be that.
Okay, so it's
And what
not.
number is that category?
Oh, I think it's a category 2 or 3, yeah. I don't have it in front of me, but category 4 is the survivable facility that people would design a hospital or a public safety building of any size.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but in order to understand that, just referring to a category 4 without saying what you mean by that, what survivability against what? Against a terrorist, against a hurricane?
It's mostly a structural design which hold it to a higher standard beyond a normal, because a fire and police is really a commercial business application in the code. But again, this is just, not to get off in the weeds, but when you add to anything that's an older building like this, you got to minimally meet the current standards even for a regular structure.
Sure.
So how you do that is very touchy.
Right.
Can it be done? Sure. Whether it's a category 4 or not, I would say that if you look at a range from low to high, a category 4 might be the high. We're not telling you to do a category 4. We're just saying that we're giving you a range from low to high, but regardless of that, to go to your point, when you're demoing part of a building, you're adding onto that building, and a building's 50 years old or 45 years old, you're going to have that challenge no matter what category you designed the addition to.
So part of this was a feasibility study, right? So if we say that that's the option the town does, that they want to focus on, then you would do a lot more work into what you're saying.
We would develop that, and that's something we would discuss. It's a misnomer in the industry, because I do public safety for a living, that every single police station or every single fire station is got to be a category 4 construction. That's not correct.
Yeah.
A lot of it is self-determined. It has to do with where it's located. If it's a lot of our coastal clients prefer to do that because of hurricanes or nor'easters, but you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But I think within a range of low to high, it gives you an idea, again, conceptually, on a rough order of magnitude, what these spreads might be.
Right.
But the point you were making, Chris, was that, does it make sense to
Yeah,
do
I'm
that?
just trying to figure out if just complete renovation versus any kind of demo plus addition is what's more cost effective, and I'm not sure renovating, a full renovation of that
We don't
site
know
is
that
cost
until we see the
effective.
costs.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
but I would just say on that though, again, that if we say that this is what we feel like is a good solution for the fire department, then there's a lot more work that will shake out about what should be demoed, should it, you know what I mean? So to me, because when you touch an old building, like you're saying, that's 50 years old or 40 years old.
Right.
You're automatically, it's the seismic issues, the structural, the foundation.
The structural is the big one.
Right, and that's what you start, and then you're gonna have to go
Yeah.
back in, and so that's what you need to study. If we say
Yeah.
that this is the option that should be pursued, then you're gonna get into more details. Right now,
Yeah.
you're saying worst case, this is what we think is gonna, so I'm just trying to explain for everybody, myself, is that
Yeah,
if that's
you're right
a
on.
viable option, there's a lot more work and design to flesh out
Right.
some of these statements that you're making. And maybe it gets lucky where we can just cut off half the building, and then we say, all right, well, the existing building is fine, and it's a lot cheaper, but I'm just trying to help explain to me these order of magnitude costs.
And I agree with you, but in order for us and the town to decide whether option 1, 2, or 3
Yep,
is viable, is you have to have other options, which are not necessarily the best solution.
I-
Might be the second best, or might be the third best, and might even be the only thing we can afford. And so I think I heard you say that you can estimate the numbers for renovating the entire 20 Court Street. Recognizing there are all these other issues, but I think I heard you say you can do the numbers like that.
Well, I mean, we can, but having said that, I think that
I
the
think
viability of doing so is not really a very good option, so,
just to interrupt, I think to do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You would have to say, if they said, all right, this is the cost to renovate, they'd have to heavy disclaim saying, we have to do a structural analysis, you have to do this,
That's fine.
because you don't want us, the town, to come in and say, well, we can do it for 10 million and renovate.
Oh, I
And then
agree.
it gets into this thing where it's now 15 because, the whole thing with, like we talked before about the scope of.
I absolutely agree with
Right.
you. But the weakness overall to what's being presented is, to me, is that none of these options are affordable. The town's not going to buy $21 or $25 million worth of public safety facilities. If they do, they're not going to buy an $8 to $10 million DPW project or an X 100,000 or Y 100,000 town hall renovations or whatever the numbers are going to be to renovate this place. So one of our principal goals was to try to get options that were realistic and affordable. And I hope I'm wrong. I mean, maybe everybody's going to say, yeah, we really recognize how bad things are. Look at this video. It's clear. It doesn't make sense. We got to do something for police and fire. So let's go ahead and spend, 20X million. I just really doubt that. I mean, even though it's more justified to do this work than it was to do the recreation department proposal for the community center, the sticker shock involved, I believe, is going to be the undoing of this. And we're going to be delayed by several years in trying to do that and fit that in with other town CIP needs. So I think we just have to grapple with that and see whether or not there are other options that are suboptimal that might be more affordable, recognizing there are degrades, recognizing that they're not going to meet all of the needs. The question will be, can they be a sufficient enough improvement over the current situation to justify doing it? And that's not your job, but it is the job that the voters are going to try to face, and it is, I
well,
think,
no, every
our
community we
job.
work with is that same way. I mean, you're nailing it. Every community that we work in, I think that is a conversation to come you, chief, and your staff, because I don't see how you take that facility that you're in now and make it fit your future needs 10, 15, 20 years.
It doesn't fit now, right?
It doesn't fit now.
I think
So,
this is a challenge.
and because of how the building's constructed, I don't think it's, if we really believe that, we would have put that on the table, trust me. I'm a very, I'm a very realistic person, you know? I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all in agreement that there's something that has to happen, and I think that this is gonna be a sticker shock, it's a challenge, and I think the chiefs know that. I mean, right, this is gonna be a challenge. I think everything that we have to do is to flush out all the options, and that's what we're trying to help with.
Yeah,
Presentations to the
absolutely.
community, I mean, that's exactly but it's gonna be a challenge, we know that.
Yeah,
This
that
is
was built
huge.
into this process.
Yeah, so I think,
Well, but not if it comes.
part of this is for you guys, I say, Bob, for your team, is to really be able to present and justify and defend exactly the questions that we are asking, right?
Yeah, and quite frankly, the chiefs and everybody else, because
Yeah, right.
we're your pencil, we're your mouse,
Yes.
we are, Chris knows me, I'm a very realistic guy. Every
Yes.
community we work with has the same concerns that you do, you're not unique. However, if an investment is gonna be made, it should be the right investment. I mean, that's what I would say. Money doesn't grow on trees, we totally get that.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's something you can discuss, you know, in the next couple of weeks or month. I know we're not doing the community meeting till much later. But I think that there are a lot of other issues. I want to go through the cost budgets and.
Yeah, we do have a
Yeah.
hard stop at 6:30, so I want to make
Yeah.
sure we get everything in,
Yep.
and there is a meeting in here at 7.
Absolutely,
so-
and I,
Yeah, so let's get through the rest
so
of the
option
costs.
two,
And- oh,
so option one is the
well,
least,
and-
option one is the least costly.
I
Yes.
don't mean to slow you down, but option one, so that's the least costly, is that, I was gonna say, what makes it option one? Is it a price, or is it?
Option one is least costly because we're keeping a piece of the existing building.
Okay.
So we're not cost loading it a brand new construction. You know, and if you were not to build a substation, I mean, the decision whether to do a substation or not, again, we are on record through the MRI studies and everything we've done. And the chief is right here. He can, you know, talk on behalf of his department and advocate. But if you could build on Continental, police only, in all these options. The only time it becomes untenable is if you go somewhere far out, like on Holland Drive, which then forces the issue, right? So the reason this is the least expensive is because you're keeping a piece of the existing building, and there's some parking there and some of these things that we already have, right? Option two would be again, new police with or without the substation, right? That's a constant, that doesn't change, just like it did in the chart that we did. This would be you know, brand new, one-story, 17,000 square foot station. So Chris, this is what you just said a few minutes ago. You come and you demolish the existing building and you build a new building, with or without the substation. And then the last but not least is the option three, which basically, again, is the same thing on Continental, but it would have a new fire station on Holland Way. However, I would say, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong here, if you were to build it here, you would need a substation. Would you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that statement.
Yes. So to me, as somebody who cares about, actually my son lives in Exeter, my younger son lives in Exeter, and working with a lot of communities, I personally understand the emotional attachment of the community to keep a piece of the current public safety component in the downtown area, right? So, but that's something that has to come from the community and from the people in this committee, as a guide. But the least expensive option potentially would be to try to keep a piece of the current building, build a police without a substation, you know, on Continental, and then put an addition onto the current station that really addresses the large apparatus and logistical issues of the fire station, which are, you know, the bays, the various size bays, apparatus and EMS bays, and all the things that go with it, the decon, the bunker, the living quarters, and everything that to meet modern standards. You know, so.
You. I don't know if we have any people in the public who want to ask questions before we get into ours. I don't know how we check that, Dave. If there's nobody, then we'll get into our stuff. There's very little participation, okay. Everybody's gonna watch it on a recording, I
Yeah.
assume. All right, so I guess we,
No, there are no attendees.
And it was on Facebook too. It's on Amanda's
I-
post. We don't carry much weight, I guess.
all right, so now, I guess we can open up for questions on our side.
I have a few if it wants to go.
Yeah, who wants to start?
Let me go before Peter, because.
No, I'll defer to everybody. No, I'll defer to
Yeah,
everybody.
let's wait for him for the end. So I just have a couple questions. So I'm gonna jump on, on the programming. First of all, I'll ask Chief Pullen a question. So you talk about that, as far as where you are, you're flexible because of how you guys operate. I totally understand that. But do you
I'm just
think,
gonna sit down.
but do you think that they're having a police physical presence downtown is it an advantage to the community, to the town, to the downtown, or not, I guess? What is your opinion about having a physical presence downtown?
My personal opinion is I like it. I think it adds that extra sense of safety for the people downtown and the businesses, which is right now is our hub. I know Epping Road's growing as well, but, so I like that, I do, but we can go anywhere.
Right.
I've seen other departments move away from downtown to different locations. Somersworth's one of them. They were downtown, and then they moved kind of to a different outskirt. I don't know what the impact was there. That would be good to look at. Do we get a lot of walk-ins from downtown? We don't.
Right.
We also don't ask, did you walk here or did you drive here? But I would, from what I've seen, the traffic coming in usually drives here.
Yeah. Just from my personal opinion, is I just like the idea of the presence of the police downtown. I think it adds something to it. But I get the fact of what's been done with the studies and the site feasibility and I agree with having the fire department. It seems economically to make more sense to have a fire department. But the reason why I was asking the 32 Court Street property and why I was asking parking garage, because the only reason why they won't work is the parking issue. And so that's why I brought up, realizing that it's a lot more expensive to do an underground or subsurface parking garage, whatever combination of that is. So that's my question on that.
Dovetail off your question?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I wonder in the future of policing, like, are there going to be anything that you're doing differently, like the way that you're running the department, or ideas you have for the future that are gonna be a different sort of direction that policing might go, that might be different community involvement or something that might make being in town more appropriate? That's what I don't know enough about that, but I imagine with the conversations we've had over the years that policing might grow in different directions.
Definitely is a more of a stronger shift towards more community policing, even more than it was in the 90s. And we see the big need for that comeback. Being downtown, it's great. We step out, we walk downtown to grab a lunch, we walk the streets downtown, we see, more of us are doing that. If we're not here and we're in patrol cars, they're still gonna do that, but you might get less, right? You'll get one sector car come park and walk, or if we come get lunch, we'll park, walk, get back in the car and go. So there's more benefit to being downtown, there sure is, especially with community. As far as future of policing, just this year we need to look at accreditation, and with that comes a lot of building issues, fencing. Our generator needs to be fenced in, the parking's fenced. So with that comes different pieces for the physical building as well. The layout of the evidence room, things that we might not meet the standard right now. So putting a fence around a generator, that's fine. We'll have Public Works do that. But some of the bigger issues, an interview room off our lobby for, just for more privacy, or for someone that can't make the stairs. Right now, I mean, you folks know what we use for that. So that, a community room for training our own officers, and to host training, or to have meetings like this. That would be future community needs.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Peter?
Well, how long are you gonna go?
No, I'm actually not going to go very far.
Okay, all right, go for it then.
I guess what I'm struggling with is,
I mean, you're welcome to do what you
No,
want.
no.
I just got a couple questions too.
well, then go ahead, really.
No, go ahead, start.
Not now, but at some point in the near future, and I have to speak for myself, I would like to get some sense of where the best is the enemy of the good enough. Let's say, and it may not be the case, but let's say options 1, 2, and 3 are the best. And they cost between $21 and $25 million, depending on what's in there. I hope I'm wrong, but if that's not affordable, either politically or fiscally, then are we served in any way, shape, or form in looking at the 75% solution, or the 80% solution, or even the 65% solution, assuming that's still, and I don't know how to define that, by the way. It's certainly not just square feet. I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form. How we get a handle on that so the town can make an educated judgment that says, we know what our experts say, and we know we wish we could do that, but we can't. So what kind of goodness can we afford to buy? That's one question. So how we do that and whether it's possible, I don't know, but I'd ask you guys to try to think of that. Because I think it's going to come down to some discussions like that at the end of the day for the voters. The other thing I didn't get from this was what kind of alternative buildings there are that might meet some of the needs. I mean, I understand the category 4 stuff, and I'm not certain I agree or disagree because I don't know enough about it.
It's an option.
Right. But are there construction processes, are there, and I don't want to use the term Butler building because that's a really heavy-handed and overly general and not very sophisticated, but are there some kinds of, other than traditional bricks and mortar, that can help meet the operational requirements of the two departments that might change the cost numbers to be more affordable? And the answer might be no. If you do that, you lose all this operational stuff and it's still going to cost you this. But I don't get any sense of anybody sort of doing those kinds of options.
So I can answer the last question you asked. In the low to high range, you're looking at that kind of a range of, sort of a steel pre-engineered kind of building with a nicer exterior. Again, we're getting off in the weeds a little bit because we're not haven't designed anything yet, but in that range that we gave you, and you have an architect sitting on your right, I'm sure you're right, they can confirm this, it's kind of a pre-engineered kind of building with a nice skin, maybe a lower cost option. In the high end, it's more of a bricks and mortar, more traditional building, et cetera, et cetera. At least at a level that we know right now, have we designed anything yet? So that range gives you a realistic range, which is projected out, I want to point out, a year and almost a half from now, right? For the police. The other part, I really can't answer it. It really is the chiefs and Dave and the town has to answer that. But I will tell you that whatever money's put into any solution should be done with, not that we wouldn't, in mind with the fact that you don't want to throw good money after bad. Whatever investment's made should be a long-term investment for the future rather than a Band-Aid. Now, having said that, I want to say it one more time, and I mean it with all due respect, because we're very excited to be working with this community. Every community we're working with in 3 states that we're working in right now are saying the same thing. We're all concerned about numbers, we're all concerned about budgets, we're all concerned about the viability of having the community buy into it. But it has to be, I would, suggest and urge to look through a lens where you don't want to throw some temporary money at something that in 5 years or 8 years would be looked at as being not well spent necessarily.
And I think you'd be preaching to the choir. I don't see anybody here.
Yeah. I'm not saying you are.
No.
I'm just, yeah.
Last thing.
Peter, can I just follow up on the
Oh, yeah.
somewhat there? So, and Chris, I don't know if we're gonna do recommendations to Dave on this or not. This may be.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
So, because one of the things that, just to build on what you're talking about on the numbers, and totally understand that there are ranges and this is order of magnitude, but I think it's gonna help us or the community understand what that buys us. So when you say 20, or whatever the numbers are for, say, for police is, 14 million, what does that look like? Like, or is that similar? Do you have a reference point from another town to say this cost them? Because that's what people are gonna drive to, saying, why can't you do it for 12 million instead of 14 million? So it may just help as far as the sharing.
I can ask Mark to clarify that, because the way we normally would do it is, once we have, an option that is the most viable, both in terms of location, in terms of perception of community,
Yeah.
we would do a conceptual design, which is the last piece of our study, and as a part of that, we generate what we call a basis of design, which is a short form level spec that would discuss, we would come up to that together, because we would discuss what kind of building, what's the imagery of the building, and
Okay.
things like that. So at this point, what I asked our estimator to do was to give a range, from low to high,
Right.
which is the kind of things I verbally said. Now, if for a community presentation, again, depending on the level of detail you want to go, I could go to Mark and say, well, what do you think is a low in like 20 words or less, and what is the high?
Yeah.
My guess is that it's exactly what I told you.
Well,
right?
that's
But-
fine. I think if
Yeah.
you're gonna share these numbers with the community, Dave, and
Sure.
I mean, I think that's gonna help others just to say, what are they getting for that money, so that we don't get bogged down into those. So I'm just looking at it as that. I would also, my suggestion is that you have escalation including in this, which is anybody's guess. And my suggestion is to break that out, so people can understand what it would cost today, and then add an escalating factor to what you think it is in 2023 and 2025, because my guess is that's a significant cost, right, that alone, especially for 2025. So, I mean, all of us are familiar with where the market is in construction costs. So that's just a recommendation that we want, my personal recommendation, but, because I work in this field, I understand what it is now and what the projections are, and that adds a lot to the numbers. So that's a suggestion on that.
We can, if this is what you want, today, we can do that. I just would say that if we're gonna do that, because I didn't even know, as I said earlier, I just made an assumption of what it might be as to the buyout of the first project, which would be the PD, with or without the fire department substation. But I think if you folks have other ideas, you have a member of the budget committee here, and so I think, not tonight, but you should tell us what you realistically think it's gonna be. That was just my best guess. I'll take the
Yeah,
responsibility.
no, and I think that's fine, but I think just highlighting what that guess is, whether it's 5% or, 6.5%.
Right, well, I think he said it in here. If he didn't, he and I talked about
I
it.
didn't see
but-
the numbers.
But it's probably in the rate, higher than that, but.
Which is okay, we don't need to get to
But
that.
I think that any estimator that's really doing even a rough order, he's caveating it here, because I asked him to do that, it's a slippery slope. But I think what I'm asking you to do, if you want that level of information, even at the ROM level, is to be very specific as to when you think you might, because I don't know that, I think a professional estimator doesn't look and say, well, it's per year. He may look and say, well, in 24 it could be this, and 25, you know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, well, then that's a different, my experience working with estimators is they do it annually, they'll say.
No, they do, but it might vary year to year. That's
No,
what
I
I'm saying.
absolutely agree. No,
Because anybody who said a number a year or two ago would be absolutely dead wrong today.
So I
right?
totally understand, so I don't get in the weeds, I
Right.
totally
I understand what you're looking
Yeah,
at.
I know what you're looking for.
I get it.
Yeah,
He must have did it.
No, he did do it.
It's just,
Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
point.
He did do it.
He just didn't put it
Yeah.
in there.
Okay.
Totally understand. I just want to clarify. What I'm suggesting is that you guys break that out. I'm not saying zero it out, and just show what it is. What it would be current and what you're projecting. That's, because it is a big number.
I absolutely know what you want, and I wrote it down.
Got it,
Again,
okay,
We don't
thanks.
have it now, but
Perfect.
we will have it.
So for Chris, my other recommendation then for us is that us to consider as a committee is I would suggest breaking out the substation fire department from the police as a separate price. About if we add that, that's what that cost is.
Yep.
Because I think there's already a negative feeling about that, and I don't want to see this thing fail because residents feel like that's being pushed. Anyways, that's just my opinion. But
I couldn't agree with you more.
Say that again?
The substation, the fire department substation in option 1 and 2
Three.
is included in the estimates
Yep.
and included in the graphics. I would just highlight that the bare minimum, the base is the fire department main station, right? Fire department station, and that there's an option to add the fire department substation.
You mean the police station
police-
isn't
What
there?
did I say?
Yeah.
Police, sorry, the police,
I got
all right.
that. We got that. I asked for that. I have those.
Yeah, but I would just, as far as the
Right now.
graphics in the community presentation, to show that that can be done in the future and not needed as the base. And
then-
I'm not defeating your argument, chief, I don't want this thing to fail because people are against the substation and
Yep.
won't vote for this because of that. That's just my personal opinion.
And we fully understand and respectful, and listening to Bob do his presentation, the one thing, and I know we're all on the same page, is the numbers on the Court Street station change dramatically if everything we have and everything we need needs to fit on that site, because there is no substation. The talk we had early on, and looking at the 1.9 million and what the build cost is associated with people on the site and then just adding it, it seemed to us to be less money than it would cost to build on and renovate and have 5 big bays and 4 little bays and bunk space for 8 instead of bunk space for 5. All the numbers kept going through the ceiling, and you don't see those on any of these options. All of these options need to be updated
Yes.
for a complete substation, and we felt
You mean for a complete
that those
station?
numbers, I'm sorry, thank you, we're all,
Yeah.
it's late.
Yep.
If all our eggs are downtown, and I've said it to the budget committee, and I'll repeat it to you, if that's what the town wants, we're prepared to respond from the downtown. We love it downtown, just like the PD said. But that will take money to do that. And I think when we rework all of these ROMs, and we pull that substation out and we put everything back in, I think you'll be surprised at where those differences are.
That's a
So-
critical point he's making, because I know we'll have a hard stop, but if you look at the options, especially 1 and 2, right? Whether it's a renovation addition or a new building, it's at 17,000 square feet of fire. If the substation goes away, which is fine, if it does, right? Especially for options 1 and 2, because you're staying downtown, right? The footage goes up and the number goes up because you're not putting some of that somewhere else, right?
Yeah, I think that's important to, like you're saying, is to update that and show that, because I missed that. So I think that's
Yeah,
right. So that main station gets bigger if you don't have a substation, which means more money.
Yeah, and our sketches our slide diagrams indicated, I think, without confusing the thing too much in a presentation to the community, I think the decision probably should be made whether the way it's presented is strictly the police on Continental, and then the full boat station here. And then the substation could be a subtractive number in case, you know what I'm saying? In case it gets built, because it does become complicated. There's a lot of moving pieces. I mean, we did a lot of work on this thing. But you're right, chief, that's a whole different ball of wax. It's not, you just don't build it and then it's fine.
I think that needs to be, that the way you said it, Chief, that needs to be communicated in here. So we just be clarified as far as that it's not just reducing the option 1 from 6 Continental Drive. It means that the main fire station would go up. So, okay, thank you, that makes sense.
And then one other thing about budget too, Peter, as we move forward in the process and refine what the option is, there's potential that some of those numbers can go down, like a 10% contingency. As you get closer into a final option, we could probably bring a number like that down, I would imagine, right, Bob?
Me, Bob, or?
Yeah.
I mean, right now, we'd be, any
Like-
architect that would not get a contingency of a 10% at least minimum at this point, because we haven't designed anything.
Right.
Should be fired.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
However, as we get into, in a conceptual design, we still would probably carry 10%, because what we're doing is not schematic design, we're doing just a concept,
Right.
an informed concept, beyond to finish the study that we were hired to do. Normally then, as you go into schematic design development, you lower that to 0 eventually in construction documents, but you would carry probably 3 to 5% construction contingency. So it never goes to 0 ever, but you would lower it as you get the construction documents, yes.
Or it gets absorbed with the other part.
Yeah, some other costs might
Yep.
come up. Did you had one more?
I have some, but go
Let
ahead.
me just, so what is MRI, what's their input been so far on this study?
So MRI did the operational study, which led partially to our concepts, because they talked about operational areas, the space needs, and so that was taken into account in the programming piece.
Yeah, I'm assuming they drove a lot of the programming piece.
Well, they drove part of it. I mean, we're the primary programmers, but they looked at the program and they reviewed it.
Okay,
We're the primary programmers. They didn't hire MRI to do the programming for us. We wanted them to look at the operations of both departments, give us the information, and start pointing out things that we kind of knew anyway, but we wanted to reinforce some of the operational shortcomings. Now, for fire, it could be the health, safety, of firefighters, response time within the layout of the facility, area of service. Within police, we dealt with things like booking and intake, evidence handling, evidence storage, staff areas.
Yeah, with us, it was a lot of picking out the faults that we have right now. We're not at best practices.
Correct.
Our cells have bars on them, 1978 cells. Best practices now are solid. So you can't wrap yourself around a bar, hurt yourself, wrap clothing around it. They're cleaning firearms in a sally port. I mean, that's what they really looked at. Are those things we can fix? That we'll look at that. They all cost money. But so they really looked at what do you need for an evidence room? What do you need for this? So that went into our needs assessment.
Yeah. So MRI informed the process and we had them review it, but we drove the programming effort working with the chiefs and their command staff with input from MRI.
Okay, and then my last question, the 32 Court Street property is intriguing, and that's conditional. Hopefully the warrant article passes for the Recreation Department, so we can have part of that property. And I'm just wondering for further exploration, if that property could be used as an ancillary site for something. Like, if we didn't do a substation on Continental, could that serve somehow to as a repository for equipment or something in that area? And I'm not sure what other plan state might be in the works for that area, so I think that deserves further exploration, and not just as like a single site for one thing, because we know it doesn't really work for that, but maybe if it can help ease the burden somewhere else.
It doesn't work for that if you agree with the parking requirements and some of the space requirements. If you fall off both the parking requirements and some of the space requirements, it may be a viable option, which is where the 75 or 65 or the 80% solution comes in. So I would urge everybody to not immediately reject 3032 Court Street based on the best as opposed to the maybe good enough. So anyway.
I agree with you too, Peter, on that. I think it's just maybe a little bit more work on that site.
Because, I mean, the town's not going to buy, I don't think, I hope I'm wrong, the town's not going to buy off on a $21 million building, or even more if the substation goes away, based on what looks like primarily increases in parking, admin, and a few creature comforts, as opposed to the I mean, if you look at the numbers in the charts you gave us, the pointy end of the spear doesn't seem to get a lot of increase. And maybe that's misleading in the numbers, and maybe it's because you don't have the current situation comparing it with the 20, whatever the options. So it's going to be a tough sell. And so, anyway, nothing should be, well, I'm sure there are some absolute irreducible minimum gotta-haves. But I would urge you guys to think about what are the nice-to-haves and whether some of the nice-to-haves can be done in another phase or backfit or something, just something to reduce the sticker shock without being misleading. We want to say, okay, it's going to cost this now, and if we do other things later, it might cost this.
So that's up to you.
But anyway, that's all.
I think, Chairman Weeks, I think we've listened to everything you've said, and I believe I have a better understanding of what Mr. Lennon has asked. The question I guess we ask is trying to figure out what 75% is when you look at what we have, what we're currently working in for a building with the staff we have and the equipment. You ask the question, this is what LaValle Brensing has worked with us on based on our recommendations. Can we continue to operate out of a fire station that has 12-foot high ceilings, 12-foot high doors and 10 feet wide with apparatus that's 11 feet tall and 8.5 feet wide? How much, so therein lies the tale. How do you renovate a building with living quarters over it, a fixed ceiling at 12 feet and apparatus that is already nearly scraping the ceiling, what do you do to make it 75%? Fully respectful of your
I understand what you're saying,
comment.
Chief, and if that's the only way you can argue you can't do 75%, personally, I'm not going to find that credible. Because if any, and you guys are good, any good fire chief and police chief knows what they have to have and what they can live without. And that's all we're looking at. We're not saying, don't gold watch us like you just did, and I know you weren't trying to, but that's where it is. You say, all right, look at different capabilities and reduce your needs. And then the first thing people come up with is, if you do that, we can't do our job because. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a good faith effort to try to see whether or not the numbers can come down based on still doing a lot better than we have now, but not a $21 to $25 million building. Because
Yeah, I'm guessing, Peter, what you're trying to short circuit is that process where we go to the ballot with a $20 million facility.
Oh, man.
It gets shot down, 2 or 3 years later, we do it again.
That's right.
And then we wind up with a $15 million facility in 5 years and
well, not
I
only
get,
that.
I get where your needs are but what Peter is saying is something that traditionally happens, The first time something big comes to the ballot, and we're just trying to figure out a way to have that not happen.
Right.
So we won't solve it here at all, but hopefully through this process, we will.
The one suggestion we would have, I would have, our team would have, would be if there's a target, to reverse engineer to it, but that's something, we won't discuss it, we're out of time for one
Yeah.
thing. But that's something to work at, but in the end, there's clear drivers to this that are not niceties. None of these things that we're talking about are niceties, other than possibly a training/community space in police, maybe, or a few things. These are firefighter health, welfare, and safety, which the current facility doesn't meet, number one. And on the police side, it's not meeting current standards by any means, not now or in the future. So,
Yeah, we know that.
So, I
and
know you know that. I just
The way
wanna
to couch
go on
it
record to
too
say
is not,
that,
the way
but
to couch it to the public is
Right.
not to say it's not
No, I
meeting
understand
standards. It's going to degrade the quality of service
Yeah.
from these guys.
But I think for
and
us,
women.
the outcome of this, though, it seems like there's a committee that we feel like that we're on the same page. The fire department probably should stay downtown, and then it's where the police should go, right? And then whether that's on Continental Drive or downtown. And then, I think your options that you've outlaid, now it's really trying to define or get the costs down so that these can be passed, right? So,
Right.
You've heard us, I think we're on board with your options. It's just like, okay, now how do we focus?
Right.
Get fire department staying in the existing building, how do we get that cost down, right?
On board with their conceptual options, not on board with what's in each of the
No,
options.
right, the site, I would say the site options, right? So, I
Yeah.
would
I
think
agree.
that's,
Yeah.
I think that you guys have done a tremendous amount of work. I think now it's just trying to
Yep.
focus, which is what you're doing. This is part of the study.
this is really
good.
This is what you have today is not gonna be what you finish with, right? It's gonna be much more
Well,
refined.
ideally,
You're 50%.
something from this will move forward with
Yeah.
some form,
Yeah.
rather than taking it, crumpling it and throwing it. But-
Right.
Yeah, but you said you're 50% done, right? So the final
For the study,
deliverable is gonna,
yeah.
the final deliverable is gonna be.
But
much
what
more-
we're looking for is some movement forward on
Yeah.
some version of one of these options, whether it's a combination, or knocking something off the table, or something that gives guidance moving forward.
Yeah. All right, I think we're,
Great.
thank you for your
All right, thank you.
presentation. Thanks for coming,
you very
everybody,
much.
and motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, meeting, all in favor of adjourning? Say aye. All right.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.